Go ahead, Sloane. Pull that trigger. But you better understand something first. You'll have to put me down before you touch him. That voice belonged to Carly Owen, the maid. A 30-year-old woman in a lavender uniform, standing dead center in a 42-room mansion in Charlotte, North Carolina, arms spread wide, chin lifted, with a loaded pistol pointed straight at her chest. Not at the billionaire behind her. At her. Because she put herself there. She walked into that space. On purpose. Behind her stood Ryan Turner, 36 years old, one of the wealthiest men in the Carolinas. 3 towers downtown carried his name. A private jet waited on a runway with his initials on the tail. And none of it, not $1 of it, could move his feet off that marble floor. He was frozen, watching the woman he was supposed to marry in 11 days aim a gun at his heart. The woman wearing his ring. The woman whose wedding flowers, white roses, her choice, always her choice, were still sitting in vases not 10 feet from where she stood shaking with her finger on the trigger. And up above them all, at the top of that grand staircase, hidden behind the banister rails where nobody thought to look, a 6-year-old girl in unicorn pajamas pressed a pink tablet against her chest like a shield. Little Wren Turner, bare feet on cold marble, holding a recording that was about to burn this entire engagement to the ground. Nobody in that house expected what happened in the next 60 seconds. Not the fiancée, trembling on that trigger. Not the billionaire, realizing far too late exactly who he'd let sleep under his roof. And especially not Carly, the woman this same man once looked dead in her eyes and called a gold digger, who was about to become the only reason he survived the night. But, hold on, because here's what nobody standing in that hallway knew. Not the guests by the door, not Ryan, not even that little girl on the stairs. When the truth finally came out, and it came out that very night, it wouldn't just expose the fiancé. It would expose the maid too, because Carly Owen had a secret of her own. A sealed envelope, 8 months of silence, and a reason for being in that house that had nothing to do with cleaning it. Hey, welcome back, family. Welcome back to Mr. Austin Love and Story Tales, where life's most powerful lessons come wrapped in unforgettable tales. And if you're new here tonight, oh, I am so glad you found us. Pull up a chair. Get comfortable, because you picked the perfect night to walk through that door. Now, before we go back to that hallway, before we find out how a maid ended up standing between a loaded gun and a billionaire, let me ask you something. And I want you to really sit with this one. Have you ever wondered what happens when 2 worlds collide? When wealth meets humility? When a man who has everything meets a woman who's had to fight for every single thing she owns, and secrets on both sides threaten to destroy everything? Because that's what tonight's story is. This is a story about wealth, about betrayal, about a little girl who saw everything when the grown-ups saw nothing, and about the kind of love that shows up in the last place you'd ever think to look, wearing a lavender uniform and carrying a secret heavier than anything in that mansion. Well, some of you already think you know where this is going. The rich man. The maid. You've heard stories like this before, right? No, not like this one. I promise you that. But before we get into it, family, I need you to do me a favor. 3 small things, and I promise they take less than 10 seconds. First, hit that like button for me, right now, while it's on your mind. It costs you nothing, but it tells YouTube to push this story out to somebody else who needs to hear it tonight. Second, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one, and I mean that. Whether you're up late in Houston, on your lunch break in Chicago, or halfway across the world, I want to know you're here. And third, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. I'm begging you, family. We are building something special on this channel, one story at a time, and I don't want you to miss what's coming. Because I promise you, this one does not end the way you think it does. All right, deep breath. Let's go back to the beginning. Before the gun. Before the wedding that never happened. Before a maid from West Baltimore ever set foot in that marble hallway. It starts with the man in the glass tower. Ryan Turner didn't grow up rich. That's the first thing you need to understand about him. Because everything that happens in this story, every mistake he makes, every wall he builds, it all traces back to a 2-bedroom house in a steel town outside Youngstown, Ohio. His father, Dale Turner, was a power lineman, 31 years on the job. The kind of man who got the call at 2 in the morning when ice storms took down half the county, kissed his sleeping son on the forehead, and climbed frozen poles in winds that could knock a grown man into next week. He came home with frostbite twice. He never once complained about the cold. "Somebody's got to keep the lights on, Rye," he'd say, peeling off his work gloves at the kitchen table. World don't run on wishes. Ryan shared a bedroom with a space heater and a dream. And Lord, did that boy dream. While other kids traded baseball cards, Ryan was sketching power grids on the backs of his homework. By 16, he could rewire a breaker panel blindfolded. By 22, he had an engineering degree he paid for with student loans and double shifts at a warehouse. And by 34. Ryan Turner had built Turner Grid Systems into a company worth more money than his father earned in his entire lifetime, multiplied by 1,000. 3 towers in downtown Charlotte carried his name in steel letters you could see from the highway. A private jet. 17 staff at the estate alone. Magazine covers. Business conferences where men twice his age lined up to shake his hand. All of it. Every single trophy the world tells you to want. And none of it, not 1 square foot of that imported marble, had ever made him feel like an actual person. You want to know why? Because 5 years ago, on an ordinary Thursday in a Charlotte hospital, Ryan Turner's whole world ended in a delivery room. His wife, Elena, complications during childbirth. The doctors did everything they could. And for 11 minutes, just 11, Elena Turner got to hold her newborn daughter against her chest. She memorized that little face. She whispered something into that tiny ear that nobody else ever heard. Then she was gone. Ryan walked into that hospital, a husband. He walked out a widower with a car seat he didn't know how to buckle, and a grief so heavy it changed the shape of him. That daughter was Wren Turner. 6 years old now, gap-toothed smile, wild curls that refused to obey any brush in the house, and a pink tablet she carried absolutely everywhere, recording little movies of the mansion, the fountain in the courtyard, her own shoes walking down hallways, the grey cat that lived by the garden wall. One of the housekeepers once asked her, "Sweetheart, why do you film everything?" And Wren looked up with those big brown eyes and said, "So Mummy can watch them from heaven. She doesn't want to miss stuff." Give me a second with that one, family. Ryan loved that little girl more than his own heartbeat. That was never in question. But here's the thing about grief that nobody warns you about. It doesn't just make you sad. It makes you careful. Careful in all the wrong ways. Ryan stopped trusting people and started trusting contracts. He measured every single soul who walked through his front door by one question: what do you want from me? The lawyer wanted billable hours. The board wanted stock growth. The charity galas wanted his checkbook. Everybody wanted something. And Ryan learned to see the wanting before he saw the person. His father tried to warn him. Dale Turner, sitting on the porch of the same Youngstown house he refused to leave no matter how many mansions his son offered to buy him, looked at Ryan during one visit and said, "Son, money doesn't fix loneliness. It just buys you a bigger room to be lonely in." Ryan laughed it off at the time, poured his dad another coffee, changed the subject. He didn't understand that sentence, really understand it, until he was standing in a 42-room estate full of staff, holding a daughter who cried at night for a mother she never got to meet, engaged to a woman named Sloan Mercer. Now, let's talk about Sloan. Sloan Mercer was 32 years old, and she was, by every measure the world uses, magnificent, tall, polished. The kind of woman who could walk into a charity gala in a silver gown and make 300 people feel like the party hadn't started until she arrived. She knew every donor's name. She remembered every wife's birthday. She laughed at the right jokes, at exactly the right volume. Ryan's business partners adored her. "You finally got it right, Turner," they'd say, clapping him on the shoulder. The press adored her too. Charlotte's power couple, the headlines read. The billionaire and his belle. They met at a hospital fundraiser 18 months after Elena passed. Well, met is a generous word. Sloane arranged to be seated at his table. She'd done her homework. She knew he was a widower, knew he was drowning, and she knew exactly what a drowning man reaches for. Warmth, or something that looks enough like it in low lighting. But let me tell you what the business partners never saw, what the cameras never caught. Sloane never asked about Youngstown, not once in 14 months of engagement. She never asked why Ryan kept his father's old climbing hooks, scratched, rusted, beautiful, mounted on the wall of his study like they were made of solid gold. She walked past those hooks 100 times, and the only thing she ever said about them was, "You know, baby, those really don't match the room." She never got on the floor to play with Wren. Not one single time. When Wren showed her a drawing, Sloane would glance at it over her phone and say, "Gorgeous, sweetie," without ever looking at the actual paper. When Wren had a nightmare and padded down the hallway, it was never Sloane's door she knocked on. Children know. Family, listen to me. Children always know. What Sloane did ask about? Well, she asked about the wedding budget and then doubled it. She asked about the guest list and filled it with people Ryan had never met. She asked about the prenup. Oh, she asked about the prenup a lot. And more than once, always in a voice dressed up like a joke, always with a hand sliding onto his chest, she asked, "So when exactly does my name go on the accounts, baby?" The first time, Ryan chuckled. The second time, something in his stomach shifted, just slightly, and he ignored it. By the fifth time, he'd built himself a whole story to explain it away. That's just how ambitious women talk, he told himself. She grew up with money troubles. She needs security. Love doesn't have to look soft to be real. You see what he was doing, right? The man who could spot a bad contract from across a boardroom, who audited every vendor and background checked every employee, turned all of that off for the one person closest to his own heart. Because being alone again scared him more than being wrong did. There was one night, about 4 months before everything broke, that should have told him the whole truth. Wren had a fever, 102. Ryan cancelled a board dinner to sit by her bed with a cold cloth, and around midnight he asked Sloane to sit with the baby for 20 minutes while he took an urgent call from the Tokyo office. When he came back, the chair beside Wren's bed was empty. Sloane was downstairs on the terrace, wineglass in hand, laughing on the phone about resort options for the honeymoon, and curled up next to the sleeping child instead, keeping watch without being asked, a cool cloth freshly folded on the little girl's forehead, was a member of the household staff who was supposed to have clocked out an hour earlier. A quiet woman, lavender uniform. Ryan barely registered her name in that moment. He thanked her stiffly, the way rich men thank staff, and she gathered her things and slipped out without a word. And Ryan stood there in that dim room, listening to Sloane's laughter float up from the terrace, and felt something he refused to name. He tucked the feeling away, filed it. The wedding was already in motion, the invitations, the press announcement, the merger of two lives that looked so perfect on paper. He told himself he was happy. He told himself Sloane would warm up to Wren after the wedding. He told himself a lot of things, family, because that's what we do when the truth costs more than we're ready to pay. He was wrong about all of it. And the one person under that roof who knew he was wrong, the person who'd been quietly watching Sloane Mercer the way you watch a slow leak in a ceiling, who'd seen the phone calls that ended abruptly in doorways, the smile that dropped the instant Ryan left a room, was the very last person in that house he would ever think to listen to. The woman in the lavender uniform. But before you can understand what she saw, you need to understand who she was, and where she came from. Because Carly Owen's story doesn't start in a mansion. It starts in West Baltimore. Carly Owen was 30 years old, and life had never once handed her anything for free. Not one thing. Not a scholarship without a fight, not a job without a struggle, not even a childhood without loss. So if you're looking for a soft story here, family, a fairy tale where the good things come easy. This is not that chapter. She grew up on the west side of Baltimore, in a narrow row house with a marble stoop her grandmother scrubbed every Saturday morning like the president himself might walk by. Her mother passed when Carly was 7, an illness that came fast and left faster, and from that day forward it was Grandma Ruthie who raised her. Now, let me tell you about Ruthie Owen, because you cannot understand Kaylee without her. Ruthie cleaned office buildings at night, downtown towers, glass and steel, the kind of buildings where important men made important decisions all day and left their coffee rings and crumpled papers behind for women like Ruthie to erase by morning. She'd catch the bus at 9 in the evening, work until 5, ride home as the sun came up, and still have Sunday dinner on the table by 3 o'clock sharp. Collard greens, cornbread in a cast-iron skillet older than Carly, gospel playing low from the little radio on the kitchen windowsill, Mahalia Jackson's voice filling that house like sunlight. And in that kitchen, over 18 years, Ruthie Owen taught her granddaughter 2 things. 2 rules, repeated so often they might as well have been carved into the walls. You work for everything you get, baby girl. Everything. And the second one, the one Ruthie would say with her hand cupped under Carly's chin, looking her dead in the eye. And you never, ever let anybody see you break. You break at home. You break with me. Out there, you stand up straight. Carly took those rules and built a whole life on them. She earned a hospitality management degree from Morgan State. And when I say earned, family, I mean earned. 4.5 years. 2 jobs the entire time. Waitressing breakfast shifts before class. Front desk work at a downtown hotel until midnight. Studying on the bus in between. She graduated with honors, and nobody in that arena cheered louder than Ruthie, standing on her seat at 68 years old, waving a church fan with Carly's name written across it in marker. I wish I could tell you life got easier after that. It didn't. There was a man. There's always a man, isn't there? His name was Darnell, and he was charming the way standing water is still, pleasant to look at until you learn what's underneath. He proposed with a ring and a plan, and Carly, 25, hopeful, tired of doing everything alone, said yes. 18 months later, he was gone. And so was her savings account. Every dollar she'd stacked since college, drained in withdrawals she never authorized toward a business opportunity that never existed. He left her with the debt, the cancelled venue deposit she couldn't get back, and the special kind of shame that comes from having to tell your grandmother the wedding is off and the money is gone in the same conversation. You know what Ruthie said? She didn't say, "I told you so." She poured 2 cups of coffee, sat Carly down at that kitchen table and said, "All right, so we start again. That's all this is, baby, starting again." Carly paid off every cent of that debt. Took her 3 years. She never let a single soul at either of her jobs know a thing was wrong. You never let anybody see you break. And then, 2 years ago, she buried Ruthie. A stroke, quick and quiet, on a Tuesday morning while the coffee was still brewing on the stove. At the funeral, the whole church wept. Cousins, deacons, women from the cleaning crews Ruthie had worked beside for decades. And Carly sat in the front pew in her black dress, back straight, chin level, holding a folded flag of composure over a heart that was in 1,000 pieces on the floor. She was the last one to leave the graveside, and nobody, not one person, saw her cry. So, no, Carly Owen did not come to Charlotte looking for a fairy tale. Let's be very clear about that. She came looking for a paycheck. She answered a staffing agency posting for a private estate position, packed 2 suitcases and took the position at the Turner estate for one reason, and she kept exactly 1 photograph taped inside her staff locker, her and her younger brother Marcus, standing outside his high school graduation. Marcus in his cap and gown, grinning that wide-open grin of his, one arm slung around his big sister's neck. Both of them squinting into the sun like the future was something bright coming straight at them. That photo was taken before everything with Marcus went wrong. What went wrong? We'll get there, family. I promise you, we will get there. But not yet. 8 months, Carly worked in that house. Same lavender uniform, pressed every night. Same routine. Quiet. Precise. Invisible. The way staff are supposed to be. The way the wealthy prefer their help. Present enough to be useful, absent enough to be forgotten. But here's what nobody in that mansion understood. Invisible people see everything. When the room forgets you're standing in it, the room stops performing. And Carly Owen had spent her whole life learning to read people the way other folks read weather. She noticed things. She noticed that Ryan Turner skipped breakfast when he was stressed, that on the mornings of big board meetings his plate went back to the kitchen untouched, coffee cup drained twice. She noticed that he touched his shirt collar before every important call. Just 2 fingers, a small tug, like a man bracing for impact. She noticed that some nights, long after the house went dark and the staff went home, a single lamp stayed burning in his study, and through the cracked door, she'd see him sitting alone, drink untouched, staring up at a pair of old climbing hooks mounted on the wall like he was asking them a question they couldn't answer. She noticed that Miss Mercer's voice changed depending on who was in the room. Sugar for Ryan, ice for the staff. And something else entirely, something low and quick. For certain phone calls she only ever took outside, by the pool house, where she thought the walls had no ears. Carly filed all of it away and said nothing. Not her house, not her business, not her problem. And then there was Wren. Lord, there was Wren. The first thing Carly ever noticed about that little girl wasn't the curls or the pink tablet or the gap-toothed smile. It was the quiet. A 6-year-old child in a house that size moving through the halls like a small polite ghost. Eating dinner alone at a 12-foot dining table, feet swinging above the floor, while her future stepmother sat at the far end scrolling her phone with a glass of white wine, not one word passing between them for an entire meal. Carly would clear the plates and feel that child's loneliness like heat off a stove. She kept her distance at first. Staff don't attach. Attachment is how you get hurt. And Carly's quota for hurt had been filled years ago. She'd learned her lesson about loving things in houses that weren't hers. But Wren didn't follow the rules. The little girl started orbiting her, showing up in doorways while Carly polished silver, narrating her tablet movies just loud enough to be overheard. "And this is the fancy spoon drawer, Mommy," sneaking glances to see if Carly was smiling. She was. And then came the evening that changed everything. Carly was folding linens in the laundry room when she felt a small tug on her sleeve. She looked down, and there was Wren, staring up at Carly's hair, that evening worn in 2 neat full puffs, with pure wonder on her face. "Miss Carly," she whispered, like she was asking for something enormous. "Can you do my hair like yours?" Now, Carly Owen was absolutely not paid to do that. Braiding the boss's daughter's hair was nowhere in any job description, and every rule of survival she owned said smile, deflect, stay invisible. Instead, she heard herself say, "Go get your comb, baby." And that evening, in the corner of the laundry room, Carly sat that child down on a folded towel between her knees and parted those wild curls into 2 sections, working slow and gentle the way Ruthie used to do hers. And Wren giggled at herself in the little mirror the whole time, turning her head side to side like she'd been handed a crown. "I look like you," Wren said. Carly's hands went still for just a moment. Just a moment. "You look like you," she said softly. "That's better." That was the day, family. That was the day Carly Owen's heart got involved, after 2 years of keeping it locked in a drawer. Not with the billionaire. Not with the marble, or the money, or any of it. With his daughter. And she told herself, that was safe. A little girl. A few braids. Where's the harm? She had no idea that loving that child was about to drag her into the exact center of everything she came to Charlotte to avoid, and put her face to face with an accusation that would cut deeper than anything Darnell ever stole. Because 3 months into the job, a watch went missing. Now here's the part of the story you need to hear, family, because it explains everything about the ice between Carly and Ryan. Every cold hallway pass. Every Mr. Turner delivered like a closed door. It all goes back to one morning in October, 3 months into Carly's employment. The morning the watch disappeared. Not just any watch. A Patek Philippe. And if you know, you know. But this one wasn't about the price tag. This was the watch Elena gave Ryan on their first anniversary. She'd saved for it back when they were still climbing, back before the towers, and she'd had 4 words engraved inside the caseband where only he would ever see them, time enough for us. She was gone, 11 months later. So understand what that watch actually was. $140,000 of memory in a leather band. The last physical thing on this earth that held her handwriting, her intention, her love. Ryan didn't wear it anymore, couldn't, but every night it sat in the same velvet tray in his dressing room, and some nights he'd open that tray just to know it was there. And on a grey Tuesday morning, the tray was empty. The house changed within the hour. Staff summoned. Rooms searched. Ryan pacing the study with a voice he was fighting to keep level, because losing that watch wasn't losing an object. It was losing her again. It was Sloane who suggested searching the staff areas. Sloane who walked with the head of security, room by room, cart by cart. And it was Sloane, of course it was, who stopped beside Carly's supply cart in the East Wing corridor, lifted a folded cleaning cloth from the bottom shelf, and let out a small, perfect gasp. There it was. The Patek, wrapped like something waiting to be smuggled out. Well, you already know how fast that fire spread. By the time Carly was called to the kitchen, the verdict had been reached without her. She walked in still holding a bottle of glass cleaner. No idea, and found Ryan standing at the island with the watch in his fist, security by the door, and Sloane leaning against the counter with her arms folded, and her face arranged into something that looked almost like sympathy. Almost. "I hate to say it," Sloane said, in that soft voice people use when they're enjoying themselves. "I really do, Ryan, but I've seen how she watches you. Women like that know exactly what they're doing in a rich man's house." Carly's eyes went from the watch to security, to Sloane, and finally to Ryan. And she watched him become someone else, right in front of her. The polite, distant employer disappeared, and in his place stood every rich man who'd ever looked through her grandmother like glass. "Mr. Turner," she said, calm and even, "I have never touched that watch. I don't clean your dressing room. That's not even my rotation. You can check the schedule." "The schedule?" He laughed, and it was ugly. "You people always have an answer ready." You people. The room went very quiet. And then Ryan Turner, grieving, guarded, trained by wealth to expect the worst from every hand extended toward him, looked Carly Owen dead in her eyes and said the words she would never forget. "Not that year. Not ever. I've met 100 women like you. You smile, you make yourself useful, you get close to my daughter, and then you start collecting. I know a gold digger when I see one." Family, let that sit for a second. Getting close to his daughter. He took the braids, the giggling, the only warmth that child had known in months, and he turned it into evidence, into strategy. That was the part that went in like a blade, not the theft accusation. That. Carly didn't cry. Her grandmother didn't raise a crier. What she did was slower and colder, and it silenced that kitchen better than any scream. She set the glass cleaner on the counter. She pulled off her work gloves, one finger at a time, unhurried, and laid them down flat, like a woman laying down something she was done carrying. And she said, "Mr. Turner, I have scrubbed floors since I was 15 years old. I have buried the only mother I ever knew, and I've never taken a thing in my life that I didn't earn with these 2 hands. You can search my locker. You can search my apartment. You can search every bag I have carried into this house since the day I arrived. But you will not stand there, in your marble house, and tell me who I am." Nobody moved. Even Sloane's little sympathy mask slipped, just for a second, because that was not the sound of a caught thief. Everyone in that room knew it. Everyone except the man too wounded to hear it. Carly picked her chin up 1 degree higher and walked out, past security, down the service corridor, headed straight for the estate office to hand in her resignation. 15 steps ahead of her, maybe 20, letter already writing itself in her head. Effective immediately. Nothing further. She never made it to that office, because sitting on the back staircase, hugging her knees in the half-dark, was Wren. The house's silent alarm system, A child who always knew when something was wrong, long before anyone explained it. She'd heard the raised voices. She'd heard Carly's name. She looked up and her face was wet and she said, "Miss Carly, are you going to leave like Mummy did?" That was that. Carly stood on that staircase for a long moment with her resignation dissolving in her chest. Because Rule 1 said work for everything you get, and Rule 2 said never let them see you break. But Ruthie Owen had a third rule she never had to say out loud, because she lived it every day of her life. You do not abandon a child who needs you. Not for pride. Not for anything. Carly sat down on the step. She pulled that little girl into her side, and Wren buried her face in the lavender uniform and held on with both fists. "I'm not going anywhere, baby," Carly said quietly. "Miss Carly doesn't leave." And she stayed. Lord help her, she stayed. Now, about that watch. 3 days later, the head of security reviewed the corridor cameras, because something about the whole thing sat wrong with him too. And the footage showed exactly what you'd expect it to show if this had been an honest house. The dressing room hallway, timestamps rolling, staff passing at their scheduled times. And then, a 4-minute gap. A convenient surgical 4-minute hole in the footage, right in the window when the watch would have travelled from a velvet tray to the bottom of a supply cart. The official report said the watch was moved by an unidentified member of the household. Case closed. No proof, no charges, and no name. Which meant, in the quiet mathematics of that mansion, the stain stayed on Carly. Unproven isn't the same as innocent. Not to 17 staff members who now counted the silver twice. Ryan knew better. Somewhere underneath the grief and the armor he knew, the security chief's raised eyebrow told him, the missing 4 minutes told him, the memory of Carly's voice saying, "You will not tell me who I am," told him every single night. So he tried to apologize. Twice. The first time, he found her polishing the front hall mirrors and got as far as, "Miss Owen, about what happened. I want you to know the investigation. Will that be all, Mr. Turner?" The second time, weeks later, he came to the laundry room doorway with an envelope. A bonus, a gesture, money doing what Ryan always asked money to do, which was speak for him. Carly looked at the envelope, then at him. She did not take her hands out of the linen basket. "Will that be all, Mr. Turner?" Same 6 words, delivered in a voice cold enough to frost the windows in August. And both times he stood there, a man who commanded boardrooms on 3 continents, completely dismantled by a maid's politeness. Because there is no force on this earth quite like a woman who has decided you no longer reach her. The envelope went back in his desk. The apology went back in his throat. And the ice between them settled in for the winter. Professional, silent, permanent. She stayed for Wren. Only for Wren. Braids on Sunday evenings. Cut-up apples left where small hands would find them. A steady pair of eyes at the edge of every room that child walked through. At least, that's what Carly told herself. Family. That it was only for Wren. But you already know that's not the whole truth. Because sealed away in her locker, behind a graduation photograph, an envelope marked Turner was still waiting. And in a study upstairs, a man she was determined to despise kept staring at his father's climbing hooks in the dark, and had started, without either of them noticing yet, to look up every time a lavender uniform passed his door. Walls like theirs don't fall in a day. But oh, family, they do fall. Before we watch it happen. If this story has you locked in right now, do me one quick favor. Tap that like button. And drop the word "stayed" in the comments if you believe Carly made the right call on that staircase, because I genuinely want to know what you would have done. And if you're new here, and you haven't subscribed yet, now would be a very good time. What's coming? In the next chapter, you do not want to miss. Alright, come with me. Let's talk about what happens when 2 guarded people live under one roof. But here's the thing about 2 guarded people living under one roof. Family. Walls don't come down all at once. They come down brick by brick, in moments nobody else sees, in rooms nobody else enters, at hours when the rest of the world is asleep. And nobody in that mansion, least of all the 2 people it was happening to, noticed the first brick fall. It started in the kitchen, late at night. See, part of Carly's job was closing out the household paperwork, supply logs, vendor invoices, staff schedules, and she did it the same way she did everything, alone, after hours, at the far end of the kitchen island with a single pendant light on and a cup of coffee going cold beside her. That was her hour, the one slice of that enormous house that felt, briefly, like hers. And then, one November night, Ryan Turner walked in. Not for anything, mind you. That's what made it strange. A man with 17 staff does not wander into his own kitchen at 11 at night to get his own water. But there he was, in a shirt and flannel pants, looking suddenly less like a magazine cover and more like a tired man in a house too big for him. Carly didn't look up. "Glasses are in the second cabinet, Mr. Turner." "I know where my glasses are." He got his water. He stood there a moment, like a man deciding whether to jump into cold water. Then he left, and Carly went back to her invoices and thought nothing of it, because she had decided firmly and permanently to think nothing of Ryan Turner ever again. Except he came back, 2 nights later. Then again, and again, always around 11, always inventing some small errand, always lingering a little longer at the edge of her light. The first few times, she gave him one-word answers and packed up early. A woman can end a conversation by leaving the room. She knows that trick from way back, but he kept coming. And here's what disarmed her family, because Carly Owen had a lifetime of armor against charm. Charm slid right off her. Darnell had been charming. Rich men flirting with staff were charming, right up until the door closed. Ryan didn't bring charm. He brought honesty. Clumsy, unpracticed, middle-of-the-night honesty, the kind that comes out of a man who has nobody left to perform for. One night in late spring he sat down across from her, didn't hover this time, actually sat, and he said without any warm-up at all, "My father worked storms for 31 years, came home with frostbite twice, never took a dollar he didn't sweat for." He turned his water glass slowly on the marble. "He'd be ashamed of what I said to you. I'm ashamed of it. I've been ashamed of it every day since October. I looked at you, and I saw every person who's ever tried to use me. And that wasn't fair because you've never asked me for a single thing. Not once. You're maybe the only person in my life I can say that about." The kitchen went quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere upstairs, the house settled. Carly kept her eyes on her paperwork for a long moment. Long enough that a lesser man would have filled the silence with more talking and ruined it. He didn't. He waited. Then, quietly, without looking up, "You hurt me, Ryan." First time she'd ever used his name. They both felt it land. "And I don't let people who hurt me get a second swing." "I'm not asking for a swing," he said. "I'm asking for a chance to earn back the ground I lost." Earn. Of all the words in the English language, that man chose the one word that could reach her. She looked up at him then, really looked, maybe for the first time since October, and found no boredom in his face at all. Just a tired man with his father's stubborn jaw, asking for the one thing his money couldn't expedite. And something dangerous passed between them across that kitchen island. Something warm and slow, and completely against both their better judgment. Carly gathered her paperwork, said goodnight, and left. But she didn't sleep for an hour after. And neither, in a study upstairs, did he. Well, you know how this goes. Not fast. Never fast. Not with these two. Fast is for people who haven't been burned. Through that summer, the bricks kept falling, quietly, one at a time. He learned that she hummed gospel when she thought nobody was listening, old songs, Ruthie's songs, and he started finding reasons to work near whatever room the humming came from. She learned that after every dinner party he sat alone at his desk writing handwritten thank you notes to the kitchen staff, every name spelled right, every dish mentioned, and that not one of those wealthy guests ever knew he did it. She started leaving coffee on his study desk on the hard mornings, board meetings, Elena's anniversary, the days his plate came back untouched. Fixed exactly how he took it, though she'd never once asked him how he took it. She just knew. Invisible people see everything, remember? He started drinking that coffee like it was communion. He noticed she rotated her one small luxury, a different colored head wrap each Sunday, and that Wren had started matching her hair bows to it. She noticed that he'd quietly changed the staff schedule so Carly's rotation never again included the East Wing on Fridays, when Sloane hosted her planner meetings, sparing her that room without ever mentioning it. And Carly started staying 5 minutes longer in every room he was in. Just 5. And hating herself a little bit more for every single one of those minutes. Because she knew better. Lord, did she know better. There was a diamond the size of a doorknob on another woman's hand in that same house. There was an envelope in her locker she still hadn't opened. Wanting this man was a house fire, and she'd been raised to smell smoke. But knowing better and feeling better are two different rooms, family. And some nights, there's no hallway between them. Then came August. A Carolina summer storm, the real kind. The kind that turns the sky green at 6 in the evening and drops it black by 8. Rain hammering the windows sideways. And right at the height of it, the power in the East Wing cut out with a sound like the whole house exhaling. The staff had mostly gone home. Sloane was in Miami, bridal week, a spa, her people. Wren was asleep in the West Wing where the lights still burned. So it was Carly who took the flashlight down the dark east corridor toward the utility room. And it was Ryan, coming from the opposite end with his phone light, who reached the breaker panel at the exact same moment she did. They reached for the same breaker in the dark. His hand closed over hers, and neither of them moved. Family, I need you to sit in that hallway for a second. Pitch dark. Rain roaring against the glass like it wanted in. Two people who had spent 9 months building a fortress of politeness. Mr. Turner, Miss Owen, will that be all? Standing hand over hand in the one place where nobody could see them being human. Carly could feel the heat of him behind her. Close. Closer than he'd ever stood. Close enough that when he finally spoke, she felt his voice more than she heard it. Carly. Her name, not Miss Owen. Just her name, low in the dark. Don't, she whispered. But she didn't step away. Notice that. Her feet had every opportunity, and they declined. I know, he said, and his voice was rough, like the words were costing him. You're not mine to want. I'm engaged. You deserve a man who comes to you free and clear, not one tangled up in a mistake he's too proud to admit, so I'm not going to touch you. I need you to hear that, but I also need you to know. Standing this close to you and doing nothing is the hardest thing I do in this house every single day. Every single day. Meaning, this wasn't the storm talking. Meaning every hallway pass, every coffee cup, every 5 extra minutes, he'd been counting them too. Carly turned around in the dark, slowly, and for one trembling moment their faces were inches apart. His breath, her heartbeat, the rain filling in every word neither of them was saying, and every lonely year of Carly Owen's life leaned toward that man like a wave about to break. The scholarship years, the Darnell years, the graveside, all of it, leaning. Her hand found the panel behind her. She flipped the breaker. Lights on, hallway lit, spell broken. 2 people standing a foot apart in a bright corridor, blinking like they'd been caught by the sun itself. Good night, Mr. Turner, Carly said, and the coldness in her voice, hear me, family. That coldness wasn't cruelty. Not this time. This time, it was there to protect them both. It was a fire door, pulled shut by the only one of the 2 of them strong enough to pull it. She walked the long way back to the staff quarters, lay awake most of that night, staring at the ceiling, furious at her own heart, because her heart had missed the memo about the plan, about the envelope, about the reason she came to Charlotte in the first place. Life had taught Carly Owen exactly what happens when you want something soft in a hard world. It gets taken from you. Every time. On schedule. She had no idea how right she was about to be. Because while she was losing that battle in the dark of the East Wing, 400 miles away in Miami, a phone call was happening. And in 3 weeks' time, a little girl with a pink tablet was going to walk behind a pool house at exactly the wrong moment. Or exactly the right one. Depends on who you ask. Now, family. Everything you've heard so far, The accusation, the ice, the storm in the East Wing, all of it was leading to a single Tuesday afternoon in September. And the person who cracked this whole thing open wasn't a detective, wasn't a lawyer, wasn't even an adult. It was a 6-year-old girl making a movie for her mother in heaven. You remember the pink tablet? Wren carried that thing the way other children carry a stuffed animal. Everywhere, always, one small thumb hovering over the record button. Her movies had a style all their own, long shots of the courtyard fountain, her own sneakers walking the garden path, the grey cat by the wall who had exactly zero interest in being famous, and her little voice narrating over all of it. Mummy, this is the fountain. It has money in it because people wish there. Mummy, these are my new shoes. They light up. Watch. Nobody paid attention to it anymore. That's the thing. A child filming the house had become wallpaper. Staff walked through her shots. Gardeners waved without looking up. And people say things in front of wallpaper. That Tuesday afternoon was warm, one of those September days in Charlotte where summer refuses to sign the paperwork and leave. Wren was in the back gardens hunting for the cat, tablet rolling, narrating her search in a whisper because you have to be sneaky, Mummy. The cat, doing what cats do, slipped around the corner of the pool house. Wren followed. Sneaky. Quiet. Recording. And that's when the tablet picked up a voice on the other side of the pool house wall. Sloane's voice, but not the sugar voice. Not the gala voice. This was the other one. The low, quick one. The one she only ever used out here where the walls had no ears. She was on the phone. Pacing. Heels clicking against the pool deck. Sharp and agitated. No, listen to me. The lawyers restructured the trust. If anything happens to him before the wedding, I get nothing. Nothing. 6 months of playing stepmother to that sticky little girl, and I walk with nothing. A pause. Whoever was on the other end, talking. Heels clicking faster. So we move the date up. Once the ring is on and the paperwork's signed, I won't have to pretend anymore. And if he keeps stalling on the new prenup, then you and I both know there are other ways to become a widow than to become a wife. Family, I need a second with that sentence. Other ways to become a widow than to become a wife. Take your time with it. Because there is only one thing that sentence can mean. And she said it in the daylight, 10 feet from a child. Now, Wren didn't understand most of it. 6 years old. Trusts, prenups, paperwork, that's grown-up static to a child. The words washed over her the way adult conversations do. But 2 things got through. She understood, sticky little girl. Oh, she understood that immediately, and she understood it was about her, and she understood the sound it was said in, that flat, disgusted sound. Because children can't always follow your words, family, but they can always follow your tone. And she understood the feeling in her stomach. That cold, dropping feeling a child gets when the ground under a grown-up's smile gives way and shows them what was underneath the whole time. Wren backed away from the pool house wall, one small step at a time, cat forgotten, movie forgotten, and then she ran. And here's the detail that should break your heart and tell you everything at the same time. She did not run to her daddy. Think about that. Her father was home that afternoon. Right upstairs, a little girl learns something terrifying about the woman who's about to marry into her family, and her feet don't even consider his office door. Because in that child's world, Daddy belonged to Miss Sloane's smiling version of things. Daddy laughed at Miss Sloane's jokes. No. Wren ran to the only grown-up in that entire 42-room house who braided her hair and never once looked at her like a chore. Carly was in the laundry room, folding towels, when a small body pushed through the door. Out of breath, tablet clutched to her chest, eyes too big. Miss Callie. Wren's voice was barely there. Miss Sloane said a bad thing on the phone. About Daddy. It made my tummy hurt. Carly went down on one knee. Instantly. Towels forgotten. Okay, baby, breathe for me. What did you hear? I got it in my movie, Wren whispered. You can watch it, but... And her chin trembled. Am I going to get in trouble for being sneaky? No, baby. Carly took the tablet gently, with both hands. You're not in any trouble. Not now, not ever. You hear me? She found the video. She pressed play. She watched it once all the way through, standing very still by the folding table while Sloane's voice filled that small room. Heels clicking. Sticky little girl. The trust. The date. And then the last line, sliding out casual as a dinner order. Carly played it a second time. And by the second time, her hands were shaking. Understand me clearly. Not with fear. Carly Owen had stood at gravesides and in courtrooms of the heart, and fear was an old roommate she knew how to live with. No, this was fury. Fury for the man upstairs, who had survived losing his wife only to put a ring on something that talked about his death like a scheduling option. And fury, white-hot, grandmother deep fury, for the little girl standing in front of her, who'd just heard herself called Sticky by the woman about to become the only mother she'd ever have. Carly knelt there and made her face calm, because that baby was watching her face to learn how scared to be. You did so good, Wren. You did exactly right coming to me. Now I need you to do one more big girl thing. Don't tell anybody else about this movie yet. Not the staff, not Miss Sloane, nobody. Can you keep it just between us for a little while? Wren nodded, solemn as church. Like a secret mission. Just like a secret mission, baby. And then Wren went off to dinner, and Carly Owen stood alone in that laundry room with a pink tablet in her hands and the entire weight of what she was holding pressing down on her chest. Because now, put yourself in that lavender uniform, family. I mean, really stand in it. She's the maid. Not just any maid. The maid who was already accused once. The woman this man looked in the eye and called a gold digger over a planted watch. Some of the staff still counted the silver when she left a room. That stain never fully washed out. Stains like that don't. So walk it forward. She marches up to that study, 11 days before the wedding, and tells a billionaire that his stunning, adored magazine cover fiancée is plotting against his life, and her evidence is a shaky recording on a 6-year-old's toy tablet, captured while the child was, in her own words, being sneaky. You already know what happens next. You've seen enough of this world to know. Sloane cries. Sloane performs. Sloane takes Ryan's hand and says, "Baby, I told you. First the watch, now this. She's been after you since the day she got here, and now she's using your own daughter to do it." The gold-digging maid, jealous of the wedding, twisting a child against her stepmother. It writes itself. Sloane would have it spun before dessert. And Carly? Finished. Fired. Escorted out. Name ruined in every wealthy household in the Carolinas, because that world runs on references and whispers. But that wasn't even the fear that stopped her cold. Wren. They would drag Wren into it. A grieving 6-year-old, interrogated about what she recorded and why, told by lawyers in soft voices that she misunderstood, made the center of a war between adults. And if Carly got thrown out of that house, who stands between that child and Sloane Mercer then? Who's left at the edge of the room, watching? Nobody. That's who. Well, Carly did what Ruthie Owen raised her to do. She heard that voice from the West Baltimore kitchen, clear as Sunday morning. Get smart before you get loud, baby girl. Loud feels good for a minute. Smart wins the year. So she got smart. That same night she saved the video to 2 separate places, her phone and a private cloud drive under an account with no name Sloane would ever guess. 2 copies, because 1 copy is a hope and 2 copies is a plan. She kept the original file on the tablet untouched, and she started making sure that tablet never strayed far, charged it herself each night, knew which room it slept in. And then she waited, watched and waited, for the one moment when the truth could come out in a way Sloane could not twist. The right moment, the right witnesses. Ryan's eyes open instead of defended. Maybe his attorney, maybe the security chief, the one man in that house whose eyebrow had already asked questions about 4 missing minutes of footage. She thought she had time to choose that moment carefully. The wedding was 11 days out. 11 days is time. She was wrong, because Sloane had heard the word trust from the lawyers that same week, and a cornered woman with a countdown does not wait 11 days. Carly had until Friday night. She just didn't know it yet. Friday, the pre-wedding dinner. 11 days had become 9, and 9 had become this. The last big celebration before the ceremony itself. And the estate looked like something out of a dream that hadn't been checked for cracks. White roses everywhere. Everywhere, family, banked along the staircase, crowning every table, arched over the front doors. Because that's what Sloane wanted, and what Sloane wanted, Sloane received. String lights laced through the garden trees like low-hanging stars. A quartet tuning by the fountain. Caterers moving through the kitchen in quiet formation. Guests due at 8 o'clock sharp. Carly had been on her feet since 6 that morning, working the event like the professional she was, steam-pressing linens, checking place cards, keeping her face neutral every time she passed a wedding photo display of a smiling couple, one half of which she knew to be a loaded weapon in a silver gown. The tablet recording sat, saved in 2 places. Her moment hadn't come yet. After this weekend, she'd told herself. Monday. The security chief first, then Ryan. Monday. Family. Monday never got its chance. Because at 7:15, 45 minutes before the first guests, Ryan Turner came down that grand staircase in his dinner jacket, adjusting his cufflink, and found Sloane standing at the bottom of it, alone. Still, her phone gripped in one hand, knuckles white around it like she meant to crack the glass. She'd taken a call 20 minutes earlier. From her lawyer. Sloane? Ryan slowed on the last few steps. Is everything all right? She looked up at him. And her face, family, her face wasn't sad. It wasn't hurt. It was something colder. It was the face from behind the pool house, finally worn indoors. You should have signed the new prenup draft, Ryan, the one my lawyer sent over, the one that actually protected me. He stopped. Something in the air pressure of that hallway changed. Protected you from what? We're getting married in 9 days. I'm not going anywhere. No, Sloane said, and her voice had a tremble in it now. Not fear, something sharper, something with edges. But your money might be. I found out today that your lawyers locked the trust. Locked it. If anything happens to you before the wedding, I get nothing. 6 months of my life. Ryan! 6 months of smiling for cameras and pretending to care about your dead father's rusty climbing hooks and playing mommy to a kid who isn't mine. And I get nothing? Each sentence landed on him like weather. The climbing hooks. The kid who isn't mine. He actually took a step back, one hand finding the banister, because in 8 seconds she had put a blade through everything he thought he'd been building with her, and the worst part, the very worst part, was the small voice in the back of his head saying, "You knew. Some version of you knew. That's how prenups work," he said carefully, palms out, stepping toward her the way you approach something at a cliff edge. It protects you. The scream tore out of her and rang off the marble. It always protects you. And that's when he saw what was in her other hand. A gun, small, black, real, rising with her arm. Where it came from. Her clutch on the entry table, the drawer beneath it. Does it matter? What matters is that it was pointed at his chest, and the woman holding it was shaking, and the safety was off. Carly had just stepped into the hallway from the dining room, carrying the final flower arrangement for the entry table. She saw it in one frame. Sloane's extended arm. Ryan's raised hands. She went absolutely still. The vase cool against her hands, her heartbeat suddenly very loud and very slow. By the front doors, 2 early guests, an older couple, friends of the family, stood frozen mid-greeting, her hand still on his arm. And somewhere above them all, unheard, small bare feet crept out of a bedroom and down the landing to the top of the staircase, drawn by the scream, carrying, out of pure 6-year-old habit, a pink tablet. Sloane, Ryan's voice, low and level, hands rising slowly. Whatever this is, put it down, please. We can talk about... You think everything can be talked about. She laughed, and the laugh was brittle, humorless, cracked down the middle. That's the problem with men like you. You build an empire, and you think you understand people. You don't understand anything. You never once asked what it costs me to become someone you'd want. Her hand was shaking harder now. Her finger was on the trigger, not beside it, family, on it. And Ryan Turner, The man with an answer for every boardroom, every negotiation, every crisis on 3 continents, stood in his own hallway with roses all around him, and for the first time in his life, had absolutely nothing to say. That's when Carly moved. No plan, no calculation, everything she'd promised herself. Stay invisible, stay smart, wait for Monday. All of it dissolved in a single heartbeat. She set the flowers down on the side table, quiet as prayer. And she walked, hear me, she did not run, she did not lunge, she walked, spine straight, chin level, Ruthie Owen's granddaughter in every step, directly into the space between a loaded gun and the man she had spent months refusing to love. Arms spread wide, lavender uniform, square in the line of fire. Go ahead, Sloane, pull that trigger. But you better understand something first. You'll have to put me down before you touch him. The hallway stopped breathing. You... Sloane's eyes went wide, genuine disbelief cutting through the rage. The maid is talking to me right now. Get out of my way. This has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me, Carly said. And family, mark this. Her voice did not shake. Not one syllable. Because there's a little girl in this house who already lost one parent, and I will stand here all night before I let you take the other one. You don't know anything about me. You don't know what I've sacrificed. Oh, I know exactly what you've sacrificed. Carly took one step forward, toward the gun. I know what you said behind the pool house on Tuesday. I know about the trust and the paperwork and what you told whoever was on the other end of that phone. Sloane's face drained white. The gun wavered, the first crack in her arm. You're lying. You have nothing. And that, family, right there, is when a small voice cut through that marble hallway like a bell rung in church. Miss Carly, should I press play now? Every head turned. Every single one. Wren Turner stood at the top of the grand staircase in her unicorn pajamas, bare feet on marble, holding her pink tablet up over the banister with both hands. 6 years old. Face solemn. Waiting on her secret mission partner. And before one adult in that hallway could speak, her little thumb hit the button. Sloane's own voice filled the house. Once the ring is on and the paperwork signed, I won't have to pretend anymore. And if he keeps stalling on the new prenup, then you and I both know there are other ways to become a widow than to become a wife. The recording ended, and the silence that followed it, family. The silence after it was the loudest thing Ryan Turner had ever heard in his life. Louder than the scream. Louder than trading floors and jet engines. A silence with her voice still hanging in it, other ways to become a widow, while the woman herself stood 10 feet away holding the gun that turned those words into a confession. Ryan looked at Sloane, really looked, and watched a stranger surface under a face he'd kissed goodnight for 14 months. When his voice finally came, it came out like gravel dragged over stone. It was you. The watch. His jaw worked. You planted it on Carly. You needed her gone, because she was the only one in this house watching you. Piece after piece, landing behind his eyes. The 4 missing minutes of footage, the convenient discovery. I've seen how she watches you, Ryan. Every domino tipping backward through a year of his own blindness. Sloane's arm wavered harder. Tears finally came, cutting lines through her flawless makeup. And even now, you could not tell how much of it was performance. Ryan, baby, I just got scared. My family lost everything when I was 22. Everything, overnight. I swore I would never be that vulnerable again. I swore it. Put it down. It was Carly who said it. Quietly, almost gently. And that gentleness, family, after everything this woman had done to her, is a kind of strength they don't give medals for. There's a child watching you, Sloane. Whatever you are, don't be this in front of her. Sloane's gaze flickered up. To the staircase. To the small face between the banister rails. Boots in the hallway. Security rounding the corner at a run called by the caterers. And Sloane Mercer's face collapsed. The gala mask and the fury and the performance all falling at once, leaving something small and cornered underneath. Slowly, shaking, she lowered her arm. The gun clattered onto the marble. It was over. Except it wasn't. You knew it wasn't. because their security took hold of her arms, as the older couple by the doors finally exhaled as Ryan moved toward the staircase and his daughter. Sloane Mercer looked up, past Ryan, past security, directly at Carly, and she started to laugh. "Oh, that's rich," she said, twisting in their grip as they walked her toward the doors. The hero of the hour, the loyal little maid. Her heels dragged on the marble. Her smile was ruin. "Ryan, sweetheart, you're so busy looking at me you never once asked the right question. Ask your precious maid why a woman with her degree is scrubbing your floors. Ask her who bought her ticket to Charlotte." The doors were opening, night air rushing in. "Ask her about Marcus." The doors closed behind her, and Ryan Turner turned around, slowly, roses at his feet, his daughter's footsteps hurrying down the stairs behind him, to find Carly Owen standing in the scattered petals and broken glass with her hand pressed to her mouth. And in her eyes, family, there was something he had never seen there before. Not in 8 months. Not through the accusation, not through the ice, not through the storm. It looked like guilt. Family, pause with me right here. Right at this exact moment. If your heart is pounding right now, I need you to smash that like button while it's still racing, because engagement on this video is what lets me keep bringing you stories like this. Drop the word Marcus in the comments if you need to know what Carly's been hiding. And if you're still not subscribed after everything you just witnessed in that hallway, what are we doing? Hit that button and ring the bell, because what happens in this next chapter is going to flip this entire story on its head. All right, deep breath, family, because the fiancé is gone, but the truth is still standing in that hallway, and it's wearing a lavender uniform. Nobody tells you how quiet a house gets after violence, family. The guests never came, of course. Calls were made, apologies given, some story about a family emergency, which was technically the truest thing anyone said all night. The caterers packed in silence. The quartet never played a note. And for 2 hours, the Turner estate belonged to flashing red and blue lights, radio static, and men in uniforms writing things down. Sloane Mercer, left in the back of a patrol car. Charges pending, the gun, the recording, and words spoken on a phone call that a detective listened to 3 times with his jaw getting tighter each pass. Her lawyer would be at the station before midnight. Her mugshot would be online by morning. The magazine covers were about to get very different. Ryan gave his statement twice. Carly gave hers once, in the sitting room, hands folded in her lap, voice steady. Ruthie's granddaughter to the last line of it. And Wren gave her statement to nobody, because Carly made very sure of that. "She's 6, she told the detective, standing in front of that child like a locked gate. "You have the recording. You have my statement. You don't need hers tonight." And something in Carly's face ended the discussion right there. The little girl held it together longer than any child should be able to. She answered Daddy's hugs. She nodded when the nice officers waved goodbye. And then, somewhere around 11 o'clock, sitting on the sitting room couch, she simply ran out, the way children do, all at once, and fell asleep mid-sentence, curled against Carly's shoulder with one hand knotted in the lavender fabric of her sleeve. Carly carried her up herself. Ryan followed as far as the doorway of Wren's room and stopped there, watching this woman lay his daughter down, slip the shoes off her small feet, and pull the blanket to her chin with a practiced tenderness that no one had ever taught her to have in his house. Carly set the pink tablet on the nightstand, plugged in its charger the way she did every night. Neither of them noticed the small red light in its corner, still recording. She smoothed a curl off the sleeping child's forehead, whispered something too soft for Ryan to hear, and turned for the door. He stepped back into the hallway to let her pass. Neither of them said a word on the stairs. Well, the words were coming. They both knew it. Words had been building in that house for 8 months. And tonight, the dam had cracks in it. It was almost midnight when Ryan found her in the kitchen. Her kitchen, the pendant light, the far end of the island, the same territory where the bricks had first started falling all those months ago. She'd changed out of nothing. She was still in the uniform, and the sleeve was torn at the shoulder seam. From the moment security had rushed past her, or from the whole night itself, who could say? Her hands were wrapped around a cup of coffee she had not touched. It had gone cold an hour ago, She held it anyway, the way you hold something just to have a reason for your hands. He stood in the doorway, a long moment. Dinner jacket gone. Tie gone. Just a man now. You stepped in front of a gun for me. Carly didn't look up. I stepped in front of a gun for that baby girl upstairs. But her voice cracked on the last word, split right down the middle of upstairs, and they both heard it. The kitchen went very still, because that crack, family, was the first time in 8 months that Carly Owen's armor had failed her in front of another living soul. And it told the truth. Her sentence was built to hide. He crossed the room slowly. No rush in him, no boardroom. He reached out and took the cold cup from between her hands and set it aside. And then Ryan Turner, a man who signed 9-figure deals with a steady wrist, raised both hands, careful as a man handling his father's, climbing hooks, and held her face like it was the single most breakable thing in that 40-room house. Carly, I have spent months learning every reason I don't deserve you. His thumb rested at her cheekbone. The watch, the things I said to you in this kitchen, every will that be all, Mr. Turner, that I earned. I'm not asking you for anything tonight. I need you to hear that. I'm not asking. I just need to know one thing, and I need the truth. Her heart was slamming against her ribs so hard she was sure his hands could feel it. Ask. What Sloane said, at the door. His voice dropped low. About why you came here. About who bought your ticket to Charlotte. A pause, and then, almost soundless, about Marcus. There it was, the name in his mouth, in her kitchen at midnight. Tell me she was lying. And Carly Owen, the woman who did not cry at gravesides, who folded her breaking into flags and carried it with her chin up, who had never once let anybody see her break, felt tears rise behind her eyes for the first time in 2 years. Because here is what that man did not know. Family. Here is what nobody in that house knew. In the staff quarters, in a grey steel locker with her name on a strip of tape, taped behind the photograph of a boy in a graduation gown, sat a sealed envelope. It had travelled from Baltimore to Charlotte in the lining of her suitcase. It had been moved, re-hidden, and checked on more times than she could count in 8 months. She had carried it since the day she arrived, since before the day she arrived. An envelope with one word printed across the front in handwriting that was not hers. Turner. She had told herself she'd know the right moment to deal with it. She'd told herself that for 240 days while she braided a little girl's hair and left coffee on a widower's desk and slowly, catastrophically, let this house grow around her heart, like ivy. The job was supposed to be simple. The people were never supposed to become hers. And now the man attached to that name was holding her face in his 2 hands, asking her for the truth with eyes that had already been lied to by one woman tonight. What would you have done, family? Sit with that, honestly now. Because whatever you're thinking, the truth, the softening of it, the delay, every road out of that kitchen cost her something she could not get back. Carly's lips parted. Her breath came in slow. Ryan. His name, only the second time she'd ever used it, and it trembled. The night I took this job, the doorbell rang. 10:45 at night. No, later now, nearly midnight. And the doorbell rang through that enormous, wounded, silent house, like a struck bell in a cathedral. They both went rigid. Nobody rings a bell at that hour with good news, family. Police come back with knocks. Neighbors call first. A midnight doorbell is its own species of sound, and every adult alive knows it in their spine. Ryan's hands left her face. Stay here. She did not stay there. She followed 3 steps behind him down that long hallway, past the swept glass, past the roses the staff hadn't had the heart to clear, her torn sleeve brushing the wall, because whatever her body knew, it knew this bell had her name on it. Through the sidelight glass, in the porch lamp's glow, stood a man neither the night nor the hour could ruffle. 60, maybe. Grey suit, pressed. No tie. Silver at his temples. And under one arm, a leather folder, the old-fashioned kind, worn soft at the corners like it had crossed years to get here. He did not look like police. He did not look like press. He looked like an ending. Ryan opened the door. "Can I help you? It's midnight." And the man in the grey suit didn't look at Ryan. "Family, hear me." A billionaire opens his own front door, and this stranger's eyes went straight past him, over his shoulder, down the hallway, and landed on the woman in the torn lavender uniform like she was the only person in the Carolinas. Carly stopped walking. The vase, the glass, the whole night, none of it had reached her legs. This did. Her legs stopped and would not answer. The man inclined his head to her, courteous as a funeral director, and he said 5 words. 5 words that turned Carly Owen's blood to ice water in her veins. "Miss Owen, it's time. He knows." Not hello, not forgive the hour. It's time. He knows. Ryan turned in the doorway, slowly, so slowly, looking from the stranger to Carly and back, and you could see the question assembling itself on his face, the same question, always the same question now. Who are you? Carly's hand found the wall. And upstairs, while 3 people stood frozen around an open front door, a pink tablet sat on a little girl's nightstand in the dark, its small red light burning steady. Still recording everything. Family, breathe with me for a second, because I know your mind is running right now. Mine too. So let's lay the questions out on the table one by one, the questions that Hallway left us holding at midnight. Who is the man in the grey suit? A man who shows up at a stranger's mansion at midnight, walks past a billionaire like he's furniture, and speaks to the maid like they have history, because they do have history. That leather folder under his arm crossed a lot of miles to reach that porch. What's inside it? What's in the envelope? The one in the grey locker, behind the graduation photo, sealed for 8 months. 1 word on the front, Turner, in handwriting that isn't Carly's. She carried it into that house before she ever met the man, before she ever braided that little girl's hair, before her heart went and did the one thing it was strictly forbidden to do. Which means, whatever's in that envelope was the reason. The reason a woman with a hospitality degree from Morgan State was scrubbing floors in Charlotte. The reason she took that job in that house for one reason. And Marcus, Lord, Marcus, the little brother in the cap and gown, grinning into the sun before everything went wrong. Sloane knew that name. A woman being dragged out in handcuffs spent her last free breath weaponizing that name, which means she'd done her digging on Carly long ago. What went wrong with Marcus? And what does a boy from West Baltimore have to do with the Turner family fortune? And here's the question underneath all the others. Family. The one that matters most. He knows. Who is he? And what exactly does he know? Now, before part 2, let me tell you what this story has already taught us, because that's what we do on this channel. We don't just tell tales. We take the lesson home. Ryan Turner nearly died for one simple reason. He judged people by their packaging. The woman in the silver gown, polished and adored. He handed her a ring and the keys to his life. The woman in the lavender uniform, quiet and invisible. He looked her dead in the eye and called her a gold digger. He had it exactly backwards. The predator came dressed as a prize. And the shield came dressed as staff. How many of us do the same thing every single day? Measure people by their shoes, their title, their accent, their uniform, and miss entirely what's underneath. The world showed Ryan who Sloane was 100 times. The prenup questions, the cold shoulder to a lonely child. He ignored every sign because the packaging was beautiful and he was tired of being alone. Family, hear me tonight. Loneliness will make you negotiate with your own instincts. Don't do it. When somebody shows you their hands, believe their hands, not their smile. And then there's Carly, a woman who was falsely accused, humiliated in a kitchen, called a thief in a house she served with excellence, and when the moment came, she put her body between a bullet and the very man who did it. Not because he'd earned it, because a child upstairs needed her daddy, and because character doesn't check whether the room deserves it before it stands up. That's the lesson, family. Who you are is what you do when standing up costs you everything. But Carly carried a secret through all of it. 8 months of silence. And part 2 is going to ask the hardest question of all. Can a person do something beautiful and something hidden at the same time? Can the woman who saved his life also be the woman who came to take something from it? I promise you this. The truth about why Carly Owen really came to Charlotte will change everything you think you know about this story. The envelope opens in part 2. The man in the grey suit says his piece. And that pink tablet on the nightstand. Family, that little red light caught something at midnight that nobody in that hallway knows about yet. So, here's what I need you to do, right now, before this video ends. 1. Smash that like button. It takes 1 second, and it tells YouTube this story deserves to reach the next person sitting up late who needs it. 2. Subscribe and hit that bell. I'm begging you one last time, family. Part 2 drops soon, and if that bell isn't on, you will miss it, and you do not want to hear about that envelope second-hand. 3. Drop Part 2 in the comments, so I know you're locked in. And while you're down there, tell me where you're watching from tonight. I read every single one, and this family stretches further across the map than you'd believe. Until next time. Family, remember, judge slowly, love carefully, and never, ever underestimate the quiet ones in the room. They see everything. God bless, and I'll see you in part 2.
If you enjoy American Love Stories, please consider subscribing and comment what you need next. And love you all from Mr. Austin.